higher ground of northern England. But it's much milder for Wales, southern and southwest England, and here we'll see showers and longer spells of rain with temperatures up to 12 Celsius. Similar on Sunday, showers and mild air in the south, cold further north with some hill snow.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome to Farage. I'm Mark Steyn in for Nigel. I said the other day he was working on his tan in the Turks and Caicos, but it turns out he's actually doing panto in the South Sandwich Islands, the best widow twanky since, I think, Tom Cruise. On tonight's show, China. They give us COVID. We give them the global propaganda coup of the Winter Olympics. Peter Hitchens will be here to talk about that. Plus, I'm going to be talking pints with Edwina Currie. Don't miss that. And of course, the indispensable part of the show, your thoughts on what we're talking about and what we're not. Send them along to gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. That is all. Straight ahead. But first, the news with Polly.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and these are your news headlines. 119,789 people have tested positive for COVID over the last 24-hour period. That's the highest level since the pandemic began, and it marks an increase of 13,000 from yesterday's daily record. Meanwhile, the UK Health Security Agency research appears to show that an individual with Omicron is up to 45% less likely to attend A&E and 70% less likely to be admitted to hospital. But they caution, due to Omicron's faster transmission rate, that may mean more hospitalisation. Dr. Andrew Preston told GB News there are still many unknowns about Omicron.
Does appear, at least in the cases we've seen, as you've just stated, that you do have a reduced risk of ending up in hospital if you do catch Omicron. But on the flip side, you've got a far greater risk of catching it in the first place. So how those two balance out as it spreads through into the older population, those with comorbidities, we still just don't know, I'm afraid.
Well, Scotland's Deputy First Minister says nightclubs will have to be closed in the country for at least 3 weeks. That's from December the 27th, and it comes on top of measures announced earlier this week by Nicola Sturgeon, which saw the return of additional restrictions in the country, which include the requirement for 1 metre social distancing and a maximum capacity of 100 people standing at an indoor event. The measures are thought to impact around 150 clubs across the country. People now won't be able to operate without the appropriate social distancing between groups and table service. International news, and the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has urged Russia to enter talks over its military build-up on the border with Ukraine. That comes after the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he doesn't want conflict with Ukraine, but called for no further expansion of NATO eastward. Speaking at his annual news conference, Western powers fear Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine as early as the beginning of next year, which Putin has denied. Here, members of an organised crime group who stole thousands of pounds in a series of ram raid burglaries have been jailed. 5 men were sentenced after pleading guilty to conspiring to burgle 3 premises in Westminster last year. Officers were able to identify them using evidence from CCTV, phone records and automated number plate recognition on cars. Clarence House has confirmed the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall will be spending Christmas Day with the Queen at Windsor Castle. It'll be Her Majesty's first year without her husband, Prince Philip, who died in April. Buckingham Palace has also announced that a service of thanksgiving for the life of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place next spring at Westminster Abbey. That's all from me. Now back to Mark.
Two years ago, late December 2019, a Chinese doctor, Li Wenliang, was WeChatting on social media about what he called 7 SARS cases at his hospital in Wuhan. A few days later, he was ordered to the Wuhan Public Security Bureau and made to sign an official confession promising to cease spreading false rumours about coronaviruses. The rumours were so false that a couple of days after his police interrogation, Dr. Li caught the totally falsely rumoured coronavirus and died a month later. He was 34. And thus, Chairman Xi's blood-soaked regime embarked on the same strategy it had used with SARS almost 2 decades earlier. Arrest anyone who tells the truth and lie to the world. Domestic flights out of Wuhan were shut down lest the likes of Dr. Li infect Beijing or Shanghai, but international flights carried on to Milan, to Seattle, to London. And because of China's lies, over 5 million people are now dead, and normal life in this country and many others has been on hold since March 2020. Our public health guys like to talk about COVID as a war, but if it is a war, it's a war the West is waging on its own people, while the fellows who unleashed this thing on the world have gotten away with the deaths of 5, 6, 12, however many million people it will have offed by the time it's done. While the West chose to tank its own economy and paralyse itself, China, under cover of COVID, has been advancing its strategic goals on every front. It's threatened Taiwan, it's trashed the one country, two systems Hong Kong agreement, and Big Butch Boris Johnson has barely uttered a peep about that. China's buying up Latin America. And Joe Biden is silent about that, possibly because of the Biden family's extensive business relationships with Beijing. As an independent panel has just found, the Chi-Coms are committing genocide against the Uyghurs. And yet the Muslim world and all those Muslim lobby groups bleating about so-called Islamophobia in the West 24/7 haven't got a word to say about China's ever-growing mound of Muslim corpses. One country, two systems. In mainland China, The Tiananmen Square massacre never happened. In formerly British Hong Kong, the university has a famous statue commemorating Tiananmen Square, the Pillar of Shame. Oh, no, wait. Oh, I'm so sorry. It turns out the authorities have now taken it down. So much for one country, two systems. Instead, it's one system, two countries. In one China, the Uyghurs get slaughtered and Hong Kongers lose their rights, and scientists get disappeared if they tell the truth about the origins of COVID. And in an entirely different China, in 5 weeks' time, the world's athletes will be jetting in for the Winter Olympics as if it's perfectly normal to be ice dancing and curling and two-man luging to advance the prestige of Chairman Xi as his ugly dictatorship tightens its grip as the world's dominant power. Should we be going to this dictator's games? And what should we do about China's responsibility for COVID? Reparations? Economic decoupling? Give me your thoughts. GBviews at gbnews.uk or via Twitter at GBnews. The contradictions of our world were nicely caught in a tweet from Peter Hitchens, the one and only. Peking has removed a monument to the Tiananmen Square massacre in Hong Kong as part of an effort to hide that it ever happened. Why is it that people still get so worked up about the long-dead British Empire and are indifferent to or even friendly to the Chinese Empire? That's a question worth asking. In fact, one can make the case that Chairman Xi is actually reconstituting the British Empire. He's gobbling up the Commonwealth, country by country, from the Solomon Islands to Sri Lanka to all Britain's old Indian Ocean ports to Uganda to Antigua in the Caribbean. Beautiful, pretty, small Antigua, where China has invested $1 billion, which seems rather a lot for a country of under 100,000 people. Peter Hitchens, the man himself, must-read columnist and author, joins me now. Peter, it's great to see you. In a sense, I guess, your tweet reminded us that empire is always with us. And if it's not the British, it's going to be somebody else. And when that somebody else is China, it's a bit ridiculous to be harping on about things that happened hundreds of years ago.
Well, yes, it is. I mean, I will defend some aspects of the British Empire, though not all of them, and always quote George Santayana, the Spanish-American philosopher, who said the world never had sweeter, more boyish masters, and that when the British Empire was finally swept away, a lot of people would be sorry, I think implying that what replaced it would be worse. Certainly what I have seen of the Chinese Empire is very dispiriting and worrying indeed. And I went, when it was still possible to do so, to Xinjiang, the territory formerly inhabited, still inhabited, but now as an oppressed people by the Uyghur Muslims some years ago, and was shocked by the way in which it was being treated even then. We all know about Tibet as straightforwardly invaded and taken over by China. And we see all the time China's increasing menace to its neighbors, and its clear intent to insert itself into large parts of the world, particularly Africa at the moment, which must end in it having greater prestige and power, and something which seems to me to look like an empire, and walk like an empire, and quack like an empire. And why shouldn't we call it that? If people are upset about the British Empire, and I accept many of the criticisms of it that people make, then that's fine, but it's dead, it's over. The empire that one should be worrying about at the moment is the expansionist and extremely dictatorial Chinese one, and why do we not hear more about it? I happened to be listening to the radio last night when news came over of the removal of that monument in Hong Kong, and I thought, well, here we have an actual open, deliberate suppression of the truth of the kind which Stalin used to go in for in his days at the head of the Soviet Union, and one which sent a very considerable shiver down my spine. And so that's why I tweeted what I tweeted. I thought, well, here they are. It's so blatant. They don't even care that we see this. Right. They do it, and they say, this is what we do. This monument, and indeed the memory of the whole event, is no longer allowed. You'll remember a few weeks ago there was that extraordinary episode of The Simpsons where the reference to the Tiananmen Square has been removed, of course, in any Chinese transmissions of it. There's nothing that they won't do to suppress news of this. And think of this, it's vitally important to me, because I think it's a fascinating illustration of what's gone wrong with our foreign policy. In 1989, the same time as the Chinese Politburo decided that they would maintain their power by slaughtering their own people, the communist leadership in Moscow and indeed in East Berlin decided they would not do that to maintain their power.
Right.
Absolutely. But here's the thing: the response of the West to these two different approaches, the repeated humiliation of Russia, refusal to recognize that it's withdrawn huge amounts of territory, the continued ramping up of stories about how it's expanding when it's actually doing the opposite, and kowtowing to China, kowtowing, which I have to point out you do yourself. You refer to the Chinese capital city as Beijing, a completely absurd thing to do. You don't call any other foreign capital by its local name. You call it by its English name, and this is actually the result of a campaign by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which approached Western newspapers, and in one case we know of, the London Times, actually went and said, if you don't start calling it Beijing, we will withdraw cooperation from you. Imagine, just for a moment, if you would, the British Foreign Office going to Le Monde, the great French newspaper, and saying, if you don't stop calling London Londres and start calling it London, we will withdraw cooperation from Le Monde. Everyone would laugh. But in the case of China, not only do they not laugh, they do as they are told over and over again. And people do it. Everyone in the British media, except me, does this kowtow day after day, time after time, hour after hour. They don't even realize that they're doing the cultural cringe to China, common in our society, runs through everything we do and say.
Now, well, let me just pick up on that. The way I think it is true that all kinds of people, very powerful people, starting with Joe Biden and a lot of other G7 leaders too, do the kowtow. And you're quite right about Peking, Beijing. One shouldn't swallow changes like that. But let me ask you this then: why do all those people? Why do the most powerful people on earth, including big Hollywood studios and including the guys who make The Simpsons, all the way down to the most trivial thing, why do they do the big kowtow? Is it because they've figured China has already won and they're already number one, and it's best to get on side with the winners?
Well, you'd have to ask them. I mean, Lenin's view was always push in the bayonet. If you meet mush, keep pushing. If you meet steel, withdraw and try somewhere else. What the Chinese have found is that everywhere they push in the bayonet, they meet mush. They see a Western world which has no guts, which has no understanding of the nature of China and doesn't care. Of course, we have to trade with China. Of course, we have to coexist with China. Most of us, I think, would welcome the new prosperity of China as a great step forward for people who'd been had seriously poor and oppressed under Mao Zedong and had been endured many decades of horrible chaos. All these things are good, but that doesn't mean we have to accept that horrible regime and stop saying at every opportunity we have, this is not something we endorse or support, and offering as much criticism of it as we reasonably can. And what the Chinese find is if they resist this and they say, we're not, how dare you talk to the Dalai Lama, you do that again, we'll never speak to you again, people stop talking to the Dalai Lama. Call our capital Beijing, so speaking, they do as they're told. So the Chinese, by this, attain a kind of psychological mastery over us. I think people should resist it more. So I don't want a war with China, but I think that if we're going to deal with them properly, then we have to stop being so uncritical of them and be much, much more aware. In the days of the Soviet Union, we all knew, thanks to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, about the Gulag. Who knows what the Chinese Gulag is called? I'll tell you, it's called the Laogai. Who knows what the Chinese KGB is called, the Gungan? But nobody knows these things. It's time we knew them. It's time we were aware of them. We're constantly making the point. This is a tyranny we're dealing with here, and an empire too.
But let me push back on what you said about the economic expansion, Peter, because essentially we can't go to war with China. All the talk about war with China is ridiculous. For a start, as we've seen in Afghanistan, America's not capable, and nor its allies, of actually winning a serious war anymore. If it loses to goat herds, it's certainly going to lose to the Chinese People's Liberation Army. But also, you can't go to war with a country that makes everything everything in your house. And increasingly in the US, the UK, in Europe, more and more of everything we buy is made in China. Whether we're talking about aspirins, whether we're talking about the chips that run modern motor cars. We could declare war on China, and a couple of days later, we'd have splitting headaches because we've got no aspirin, and our cars wouldn't run, and we'd be kaput. Is it a good idea to actually mortgage the entire Western economy to the goodwill of the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I hope I haven't become so incoherent in my old age that you think I was just advocating war with China, because I thought I said about 3 or 4 times that I was against any such thing. We absolutely shouldn't be contemplating war with China. It would be a ridiculous thing to do. We have to coexist with this power, just as we coexisted with the Soviet Union. But that does not mean that we should be silent about its injustices and its imperial ambitions, or indeed be relaxed about all of them. We have to accept that China is bound to dominate its own sphere of influence, and there are things that one has to accept about a growing economic and political power, which is bound to happen. But that's different from say, kowtowing to it, cringing culturally to it, and pretending that it's not a despotism. In terms of trade, I think we made grave mistakes. I mean, I see the current world as the horrific love child of Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping, when we destroyed so much of our own manufacturing industry and accepted the enormous amounts of cheap imports from China as a substitute for that. So much of our manufacturing, one of the great ironies of the modern world is we go on and on in Britain about how we no longer produce lots and lots of carbon that we used to produce. That's because the industries which used to create the carbon, if you care about this sort of thing, have all gone to China, where they create enormous amounts of carbon on our behalf. I would hugely like for us to re-establish our manufacturing industry and not be so dependent on China, for instance. And that wouldn't be a bad policy to pursue. But absolutely not. And I'm shocked that you might think that I'd be recommending war with China. I can't be stupid.
No. I'm just saying I don't think war. You're less of a warmonger than I've been traditionally, but I've given the idea that we could win a war against China. Nobody seriously thinks that after the way it's gone for most of this millennium so far. But thank you for that, Peter. It's fascinating stuff, and you are quite right to upbraid me for not recognizing that the capital city of the People's Republic of China is Peking. These small things are important, and you are right. We need to start saying Peking again. I may have Peking duck for Christmas after all that. Thank you very much, Peter Hitchens. It's a great pleasure to see you. Merry Christmas to you, Peter, whether you're eating Peking duck or not. What do you think? Let me know your take at GBViews at gbnews.uk or on Twitter at GB News. Coming up on a related theme, are the British police acting more like the Wuhan constabulary? And I'll be talking pints with Edwina Currie. Don't touch that dial, all still to come on Farage.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Outbreaks of rain and hill snow will affect the far north of Scotland overnight, much milder elsewhere, and fairly foggy in places, whether that's hill fog or low-level fog by the start of Christmas Eve. You can see the mild air across much of the UK, but cold air continues in the far north of Scotland, and with these weather fronts bringing spells of rain from the southwest, well, they're going to increasingly mix with the cold air, and so the snow level coming down through the night across northern parts of Scotland. Expect accumulating snow above 300 metres, 2 to 5 centimetres possible, and 10 centimetres above 500 metres. So watch out if you're travelling on some of the higher routes in northern Scotland on Christmas Eve morning. Otherwise, some dense fog to look out for first thing across central parts of the UK, and a lot of cloud, low cloud covering the hills as well. Some damp weather there for northern England, much of Scotland, but it does peter out. Whilst another active band of rain moves in through the afternoon, southwest England into Wales, central southern England, Northern Ireland later on. That is accompanied by gusty winds. Mild air in the south, staying cold further north. And it's a repeating pattern over the next few days. We've got these active weather fronts moving in, and then they stall and fizzle out across central parts of the UK. They mix with the cold air further north, so don't be surprised if there's a few flakes of snow over the tops of the Pennines as we head into Christmas Day. But Christmas Day promises a cold start, a bright start across northern and central Scotland, some sunshine here. Further south, a lot of cloud, that cloud again covering the hills, and a few flakes of snow possible for the higher ground of northern England. But it's much milder for Wales, southern and southwest England, and here we'll see showers and longer spells of rain with temperatures up to 12 Celsius. Similar on Sunday, showers and mild air in the south, cold further north with some hill snow.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Farage. Let's go to your tweets and emails. Barbara says, I can't understand the reticence of the West to speak out. Are they cowards? No, it may well be that the Chinese have simply bought up everybody in the Western world they need to buy up, including a lot of major universities, such as significant chunks of Oxford and Cambridge. They've sunk so much Chinese money in there that those guys don't want to offend the Chinese. Last year, China overtook North America to become the world's biggest film market. So you might think when you watch Fast and Furious 37 that it's a piece of rubbish made for American morons and British morons and European morons, but in fact, actually, it's principally directed at Chinese morons. So the lousy product of Hollywood, it can't afford to destabilize its most important market. That's why you're never going to see Mission Impossible 67, where Tom Cruise rappels down the wall of some compound in China to rescue beleaguered Uyghurs. That's never going to happen. These guys are all in on it. These guys all assume that China's won and China can't be offended. Here's another one. I'm not sure who this is from. If the whole world stops having things made in China. It's from Harry. If the whole world stops having things made in China for 1 week, Xi will soon wake up. Yeah, I would be in favor of total economic decoupling from China, Harry. But you're going to be waking up too, because the reason, whatever you want, your T-shirt, your socks, is far cheaper than it would be if it was made in Huddersfield or Carrickfergus, is because almost anything that is made in China, that is offshored to China, requires slave labor or child labor at some point along the way. Even if it's only the catering service that comes in and runs the catering for the Nike factory or whatever it is. This has been the single worst strategic decision in the last half century to outsource almost all Western manufacturing to China. And it actually is putting us on the edge of, ultimately, we're now a cheap service economy, baristas or whatever, all the stuff that's been closed down since the COVID, and they make everything that matters. It's insane. One more. Mark via Twitter says, go and dominate the games. Do not punish the athletes for a worthless political gesture. I have the feeling that Chairman Xi may be arranging the games to the benefit of China. So good luck inflicting a humiliating defeat on China there. OK, thank you for all that. As any creature more sentient than an amoeba surely knows, the United Kingdom is the land where everything is policed except crime. There have been any number of stories in recent years of the constabulary harassing the citizenry in their homes over so-called hate incidents, by which they mean a tweet making a purportedly transphobic joke or some such. One man who fell victim to the peeler's preference for investigating Twitter non-crimes rather than real-world crimes was Harry Miller, a former policeman himself, who was investigated by Humberside police for tweets questioning whether trans women were real women. Having determined that no crime had taken place, the Humberside police nevertheless logged it as a non-crime hate incident, which they define as one perceived by another to be motivated by prejudice. So they piled up a big book filled with names of people who've committed no crime, but nevertheless hold the wrong views, or as Police Constable Gull told Mr. Miller, I need to check your thinking, which is the sort of thing that a Chinese policeman says, but not until recently a British policeman. This week, the Court of Appeal in England found that recording non-crime hate incidents violates freedom of expression, which is being presented as a great victory for free speech, but the British Constabulary is still keeping Chinese-style social credit scores on citizens based merely on tweets that dissent from the woke narrative. Harry Miller himself joins me now. Harry, how pleased are you by this decision?
On a scale of 1 to 10, about 150, quite frankly. It's superb. We have struck a blow. We have struck a Christmas blow to freedom on behalf of the British people and, as a consequence, the rest of the world. I mean, with a little bit of luck, this will roll out into China, and we can save them as well. How about that?
Okay, you're in a buoyant. You haven't come down yet from your post-verdict high from the Court of Appeal here, and that's good to see. But you had a tough. I mean, you're a policeman yourself. I take it would not have occurred. An ex-policeman. The police today, I remember John O'Sullivan, Mrs. Thatcher's old speechwriter, saying to me about 20 years ago that the police were becoming the paramilitary wing of The Guardian. They're actually wackier than The Guardian on some of these things. The Constable Gull who told you he had to check your thinking. In what version of Sir Robert Peel's concept of British policing is that a thing that a constable says to a citizen?
Well, that's the problem. We've moved so far away from anything that Peel would have recognised as a police force. I'm friends with a former Assistant Chief Constable of Merseyside, and he told me that back in the olden days, when the orange parades were on around the streets of Liverpool, he would tell all his officers, don't even accidentally march in time with the band in case it looks like you have a particular political preference. Now, of course, with Pride, the police literally provide the band because they've embraced certain politics. They've embraced LGBT politics, and this is the truth. If you go against those politics, as I did, I said the absolutely absurd thing that only women have vaginas and only men have penises. That caused them to send a peace eagle to knock on my door. That's not right in a civilized, free, libertarian, democratic society. And since this Court of Appeal ruling, if the police continue to behave like that, well, I've got news for them, because from this day forward, I'm going to be the one that knocks, because I am now the danger. And I know that sounds a little bit like Breaking Bad, because it is Breaking Bad, because I'm proper badass. When it comes to chief constables, I am proper badass. They are not going to turn us into a Soviet-style, Chinese-style, Orwellian-style police force on my watch, because I'm the kind of bloody-minded individual that knows right from wrong, and I'm an immovable force, and I will just keep going until I win. This particular fight took me 3 years. They figured that I would have packed in ages ago, but I didn't. I just kept going because I know the difference between right and wrong, and they were wrong, and finally the Court of Appeal agreed.
Yeah, you've inflicted victories on the Chief Constable of Humberside Police, who's a chump and shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. But you've also, in this Court of Appeal decision, you inflicted huge damage on the so-called guidance, which is this poorly drafted, drivelling pap that in fact licenses the police because it defines a crime as somebody taking offence. So if they can find someone who objects to a tweet of yours, they can go and kick your door down and tell you to stop tweeting. The judge has asked those guys, has basically told those guys they got to go back and rewrite the guidance. Do you think they're going to give up that kind of nonsense?
I think they're going to have to give it up, quite frankly. I mean, it wasn't 24 hours and then Priti Patel suddenly marched into the fight, didn't she? And told the College of Policing to get rid of the guidance. Because she let me do all the heavy lifting, of course, and put my house at risk, put my home at risk, put my mental health at risk. But once I'd won, she came, riding in on her valiant horse to take a little bit of credit. And quite frankly, I don't mind Priti Patel taking a little bit of credit. No. If she's prepared to enshrine freedom of speech back into English law, then fine, she can share in some of the glory. I do think it's sad, though, that these great challenges are left to individuals like me to take on. I think that is fundamentally unfair, fundamentally wrong. And had they not come across me, Toby Young called me the wrong man. And I am the wrong man, because anybody else other than me would have let it slide. And that's what they were relying on. But they did. They picked the wrong guy. I went in and I absolutely slaughtered them.
That's a great way to put it, Harry. They picked the wrong guy. And it would be a much healthier country if we had 20, 30, 40, 50 million Harrys, just like this Harry, willing to do that. But the Harry Priti Patel thing, Harry, that's the way the politicians are all finger in the wind, squishy, focus group, all the rest of it. And what you need to do is force these people who don't believe in anything, don't believe in first principles. Some guy like you has to come along with first principles and force Priti Patel to jump on the bandwagon you started. You're the guy on the white Charger. She's riding on the back of the bandwagon. Congratulations on your victory, Harry, and let us hope that the depraved British constabulary stop sitting around reading Twitter all day long and actually get out and start investigating crime, which was, as we were talking about, which is what Robert Peel mentioned. Thank you very much, Harry. Merry Christmas to you. Now the questions on everyone's minds. What the Farage? This first one's a tragedy. Hobnobs. Who doesn't love a hobnob? Harry, I'll bet, was celebrating with hobnobs after that decision. But soon hobnobs may only be affordable for the kind of knobs who hobnob with the knobbiest knobs. McVitie's says biscuit prices are set to soar due to a combination of supply chain disruption, employee absenteeism and inflation. In particular, the cost of cocoa beans has skyrocketed. If you're thinking, oh, I usually put out a glass of milk and a couple of hobnobs for Father Christmas, but I suppose I'll just have to leave him a couple of candy canes this year. Well, there's a massive worldwide candy cane shortage too. They're being repurposed as COVID swabs or something. Oh, I think this next one is probably in the running for headline of the year. From the Northwich Guardian in Cheshire. Look at, how's this for a headline? Let's take a look at this. Northwich woman jailed for cocaine-fueled sex with dog. That's the perp right there, Claire Goodyear. She's doing the old Anna Wintour, Diana Rigg fringe thing with her hair, although unlike Dame Anna and Dame Diana, if you peer very closely, she appears to have just a very faint touch of 5 o'clock shadow. Here's the more comprehensive Daily Mail headline. Let's have a look at this one from the Daily Mail. Paedophile 60 who identifies as female is jailed for 20 months after having cocaine-fueled sex with a dog. No idea what the dog identifies as after that. Will Claire Goodyear, who was formerly John Goodyear, be going to a women's prison? If so, let's hope they keep the guard dogs well away from the exercise yard. Oh, and one more. Don't call the fire brigade in Portland, Ontario, because the fire station caught fire and burnt down. Perhaps like the UK police, the Portland Fire Brigade were all out of the office investigating incendiary tweets. No Farage to Farage, so feel free to stump the Steyn. Ask me anything you want. GBViews at GBNews.uk. Twitter at GBNews. Straight ahead, she's done everything from Parliament to Panto. Edwina Currie, up next.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hey, welcome back to Farage and to Talking Pints. Under the new Omicron lockdown, I can't believe this, Irish pubs have to close at 8 p.m. So it is already last orders in the saloons of Cork and Donegal, but here in the GB virtual pub, we're just wetting our whistle. And I'm delighted to welcome tonight Edwina Currie, novelist, broadcaster, pop star. That was I don't know whether that's ant or deck, because the solitary girl in the back of the group is carrying the whole thing. Was that fun to do for you, Edwina?
Oh, that was hilarious. That was ant and deck Saturday night takeaway, and yeah, we did have a proper singer in there. Anthony Costa was in there from the band Blue, but the rest of us were winging it, shall we say.
Well, I looked it up, and it actually got to number 64 in the hit parade. So it's not quite up there with "Feed the World, Do They Know It's Christmas," but it's pretty good for your for debut single. I said earlier you've done everything from Parliament to Panto. You've done all kinds of things, but this year you seem to tip your toes in the waters of getting back into elected politics. It was just locally, and you didn't get it. I think it was the county council or something. But are you looking at getting back into Parliament?
Well, I had a go at it because we had a vacancy actually in the ward where I live, and I had been invited to serve on the selection committee. And I thought, you know what, I have an opportunity here. Let's just see how we get on. I was watching President Biden being inaugurated, and I thought to myself, you know, he took on Trump, and nobody else really wanted to do it, and he did it at an advanced age, as we now see, and, you know, good for him. So maybe I can have a crack at doing the same thing. 'Twas not to be. I put the vote up from just over 1,000 to nearly 1,900, which was pretty spectacular.
Oh.
Should have been enough. But half of Manchester and Salford came down to help the other side, and we didn't get it. We had a turnout. Mark, we had a turnout of 55%, which was as high as in any of the by-elections, the national by-elections recently. How about that for a compliment, eh?
Yeah, that is actually pretty good. But as you said, there's all these people coming. You shouldn't compare yourself to Joe Biden. It's not altogether clear to me that he's even aware he's president 4 or 5 days a week. He seems largely out of it on many things. But when you look back on, I actually got your book here. If you want to do an updated edition, this is actually one of the most the few political memoirs worth reading, because you're honest, including about some rather personal matters and all the rest of it. But you were in one of the very few women other than Mrs. Thatcher to emerge from the Thatcher era. She generally didn't like female members of her own party terribly much, did she?
Well, when I got to Parliament in 1983, there were only 23 women members of Parliament out of a House of 656. I mean, it was astonishing. Right? When you look back at it, you think, how come that persisted, you know, for so long after the women's movement and women's votes and all the rest of it? And I have no clear answer to that. I know that I had to try for 21 different seats, right? When I was chasing a parliamentary seat, and the 21st was South Derbyshire, which was a coal mining area of all things. And they said to me, you know, what do you know about coal mining? And I said, well, I come from Liverpool, and I've been a Birmingham City Councillor for 11 years. We don't have coal mines in there, but you will teach me, won't you? You will teach me, which they did. And yet you're right. I think Margaret Thatcher actually was just more comfortable surrounding herself with men. And that way, right. I think she kidded herself that she was able to win her rights and her get her way by being nice to the men, and that they would be very flattered by that. It was a load of nonsense. I mean, she was preeminent because of her ideas and the strength of her personality. But she never at any time took any of the women in the House of Commons, and we thought the world of her, to put them in the cabinet. So there weren't any women ministers in the cabinet, with one exception for 1 year, Janet Young as leader of the House of Lords. And I think
leader of the House of Lords, Janet Young seemed an odd choice to me. Baroness Young was a nice lady, and yet for her to be the only other female cabinet minister except Mrs. Thatcher, you were far more famous. You were a personality almost instantly upon arriving in Parliament. Do you feel Parliament still functions? I mean, we've lived for the last 2 years under basically a COVID regime where the executive is very important, and the Prime Minister comes out every day and he's flanked by these top scientists who none of us had ever heard of until 20 minutes after the pandemic started. And meanwhile, Parliament itself seems completely irrelevant.
Well, Janet Young was at Oxford with Margaret Thatcher. They were friends, so I think that's where that came from. But you're right, and Parliament is and the executive are functioning a bit like they did during wartime, when there was a very small war cabinet, when big events, big announcements were made to Parliament. A great deal was concealed. I mean, for example, in wartime, Churchill did not tell anybody that the House of Commons itself had been hit and had, in fact, 17 different bombing incidents with 3 people killed. That didn't become public knowledge until after the war, and he did all that for morale purposes. I think we're better treated now, to be honest, Mark. I think we get a lot more information, sometimes, too much information, all powering at you all at once, and a bit difficult to make sense of it all. But I prefer to have Parliament as the place where they debate and talk and have sometimes fierce and angry debates. But that's what it's for. That's what it's called, Parliament. That's where you talk. Action in the end and the decisions in the end have to be done by the executive. They have to be done by the Prime Minister and the ministers and cabinet.
Well, do you think we're actually going beyond that now? One of the reasons that people didn't like the European Union in this country is that they felt it was a kind of unelected technocracy. Nobody knew where you went to vote out the European Commissioner who made the decision on the curvature of bananas or all that. Nobody knew where you would go to get rid of that guy, to vote against him. We now seem to have, though, rule by experts. Everyone, you've got to follow the science, you've got to follow the science. This has been a long 2 years. It's been a difficult 2 years for you. You've lost your husband, and I think this is the just about a year ago on this. Do you think people can actually live in this kind of shut? And I assume you had all the problems that other people have had. That even the Queen has had. How do you organise a proper memorial for a lost family member when you're all living these cramped, shut down lives? Do you think this can go on much longer?
Well, in some ways, to be honest, COVID was a blessing in disguise for us, because John had cancer. He'd had it on and off for about 9 years in different places. And we always knew that sooner or later it would probably get him. And he then refused further treatment back in the summer last year. And if we hadn't had COVID, they'd have probably hauled him off to hospital and filled him full of drips. But as it was, we were able to look after him at home. We got a hospital bed, hospice at home. And that was, I think, for both of us, a much more comfortable and kindly way of meeting that end. I'm very, very grateful for that. How are we coping as a nation, as a people? Actually, surprisingly well. I think it depends where you are. I mean, London is facing a huge upsurge in cases at the moment, which is kind of scary. But then, you know, a hell of a lot of Londoners have never bothered to get vaccinated. I say this to Londoners who are watching. Many of you think that you are invincible and that you have the perfect body. Well, no, you haven't.
So let me stop you. Let me stop you there, Edwina, because you weren't shy about saying controversial things about eggs and salmonella and that kind of thing. So are you actually, would you be in favour of these so-called vaccine passports mandate? I mean, in France, they're talking about mandating jabs every 4 months, which is something we would not have thought the state had the power to command a couple of years back.
Well, in practice, I mean, I carry my vaccine passport in my handbag. And also I've got a slightly updated one on the phone. And most of us have. I went yesterday, for example, to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester. I went to see the Halley Orchestra doing The Snowman. I was on grandma duty. And yeah, we had to show our vaccine passports before we could get in. I think that's brilliant. I have to say, I think it means that I feel a lot safer if I'm in that kind of environment and I know that everybody has got a vaccine passport or a negative flow test. That has to be a good thing. And it's been happening for months and months and months. You know, I've been on holiday, I've been to all sorts of places, and that's what is necessary. All the theatres in London have been doing that. Right. It's a shame so many of them have had to close because their staff.
Oh no, that's a terrible thing. What's happened to the theatre, Edwina? It's great to see that you are in such good form, and I hope you will write another one of these, because this is you've written 6 novels and I don't know how many non-fiction books, and they're corking. And you don't need any ghostwriters or any of that stuff. It's great to see you, and I hope you have a terrific Christmas. And next time, let's do Talking Pints in the studio. Edwina Currie, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to barrage the Farage. And let us see here. We got Cindy, who says, is the real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on your Christmas reading list? I had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on my Friday show a couple of weeks back. So I've actually read The Real Anthony Fauci. It's a terrific book. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the man to tell this story. Peter says, who is your favourite scientist out of Michael Mann and Chris Whitty? Michael Mann is the guy who invented the global warming hockey stick. I think I'd even take Chris Whitty over that. That's going to do it for us. I will see you tomorrow, Christmas Eve, live here at 7 p.m. Nigel back next week. And don't forget, Alistair Stewart will be right here after the weather. See you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Outbreaks of rain and hill snow will affect the far north of Scotland overnight. Much milder elsewhere and fairly foggy in places, whether that's hill fog or low-level fog by the start of Christmas Eve. You can see the mild air across much of the UK, but cold air continues in the far north of Scotland, and with these weather fronts bringing spells of rain from the southwest, well, they're going to increasingly mix with the cold air, and so the snow level coming down through the night across northern parts of Scotland. Expect accumulating snow above 300 metres, 2 to 5 centimetres possible, and 10 centimetres above 500 metres. So watch out if you're travelling on some of the higher routes in northern Scotland on Christmas Eve morning. Otherwise, some dense fog to look out for first thing across central parts of the UK, and a lot of cloud, low cloud covering the hills as well. Some damp weather there for northern England, much of Scotland, but it does peter out whilst another